So we'll just start from.
Okay, it's recording. Thank you, Rav. Thanks.
Great, excellent. And now it's clear. So now that we've got 10 minutes to learn, L'chaim, L'chaim. And I forgot to mention, there's a yahrzeit tonight, a fellow called Matisyahu ben Avraham and Chava Rasa Bas Shmuel. So it's their yahrzeit tonight, 30th of Shvat. Should be an aliyah for the neshama. Chodesh Tov. Mishanichnas Adar Ma'ibin B'Simcha. So, for the people listening to the recording, we're talking about Bishalakum. We're talking about the fact that if the intention of the Gentile was not to actually cook, but to burn or singe or something else, then the Gezeira, the decree of Bishalakum, would not apply. Gufa, where was the source of this? Omar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Omar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabba Bar Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, if a guy was singeing the head of an animal, for example, to remove the hair, you're allowed to eat it, even the tips of the ears, even the flesh. The concept is that his intention was not to cook, his intention was to singe. Based on this, Ravina commented and said the following. Omar Ravina said, Hilkach, therefore, Hai Goy, a non-Jew, Dishta Siksale Atuna, who threw a moist peg into an oven because his intention was to use that oven to bake not food or heat not food, but he was trying to make a peg for the tent or whatever else he wanted a wooden peg for, and the peg was moist, maybe, I don't know, from varnish or carving or whatever he did with it, and now he wants to heat and harden the peg, so he chucks it in an oven. But a Jew had already before that put, there's a vegetable, do we pronounce this gourd, I think, in the oven, some kind of green vegetable, some Jew had put in that oven already. He had inserted it, but he hadn't turned it on, and now this non-Jew came to heat his pig, and now the Jew's vegetable that had been chucked in the oven before is now heating because of the peg, and it's cooking. So we're told Shapradoma that that's okay. Why? Because the Gentile's intention is not to cook. He was trying to do a malacha, a type of work which had nothing to do with cooking. So incidentally, the fact that a Jew put actual food in that oven and had intended to cook it, it doesn't matter that the Gentile ended up cooking it. So the Gemora asks a question. Pshita, isn't this obvious? Why is this, what is the importance of the statement? Isn't it obvious that if the non-Jew wasn't trying to cook the food, he was just trying to harden his peg, that it's not a problem? So the Gemara says, no, not obvious. Sometimes the Gemara will explain what would be the possible objection, even if it's not the final conclusion. Mahu the Taima, I might have thought, Levashula Monakom Mekavim, that the non-Jew was intending to cook the vessel. Kobash Malon, so we find out, he was trying to harden the peg. It depends what the process that he's doing is called. If the process, even if it's not edible, if the process is called cooking, in other words, if it's something that you need to cook, let's say somebody makes, I don't know, when they make shofars, for instance, they cook them in the ram's horns in big cauldrons or big pots or whatever. If the process of making pegs is like cooking, then somebody might say at the end of the day, he's cooking. And when he cooked whatever he was processing, he cooked your food. And that's called cooking. What we needed to know is that wasn't cooking. That was hardening. He needed to harden it. Therefore, hardening is not a problem for the food. So that is the one lesson that we learned. From this halacha, by the way, from this Gemora, there's one of the commentaries tells us that from this Gemora that we just read, there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch which says the following, based on the statement of Ravina, that if a non-Jew cooked a food, if a non-Jew had cooked a particular food, and by mistake or incidentally cooked another one in the process, it wouldn't be allowed. In other words, if a Jew puts his left side, non-Jew came and put his food, I don't know where we're going now, and the non-Jew put his food on the right side of the oven, and both ended up cooking. And both of them ended up cooking. Do you say he never intended to cook your food? He intended to cook his food, but because your food was his food was, that's why it cooked. Is it okay or not? It's not okay. Why? Because even though he didn't intend to cook your food, he intended to cook food, and therefore his cooking action was problematic enough. The only reason with the peg it worked is because the peg is not considered a food cooking process. And the Gemora continues in this vein. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, what about Yisrael Bacher al Gabe Sholem? If a Jew placed meat upon flaming coals, and a Gentile came and turned the meat over, the meat is permissible. So what do you have over here? You have a situation where the Jew placed the food on the flaming coals. Imagine like a braai. South Africans will understand this concept well, because in braaiing, there's different parts of the process. You light the coals, you get the grid hot, you put the meat on, but you've also got to move it around into the right spots. So over here, you've got a mixture of things happening. The Jew is the one who organized the coals and the fire, but the non-Jew came along and turned the meat over. So we're told that this is permissible, that we don't worry that the non-Jew turned the meat over, because anyways, the Jew lit the coals and made the fire. So the Gemora wants to know what actually happened here. Which thing cooked the meat? The making of the fire, or the making of the fire, or the turning of the meat? What actually cooked it? Hey Chadami, let's unpack this, says the Gemora. If you're talking of a situation that even if the non-Jew didn't come with his tongs and try to move it around, it still would have cooked. There was enough heat and coal and whatever to cook it. All he did, he maybe made it cook a bit more, whatever, but it still would have cooked. Then pshita, then it should be obvious that it's okay. What's the problem? He didn't have to do with cooking it. The Jew cooked it. So you have to say the maybe it was in a position that if it wasn't turned or positioned, it wouldn't have cooked. The Jew made coals. The coals might be not evenly distributed. If the guy hadn't come and moved the piece of meat around, it wouldn't have cooked at all. Amai mutzah, so why would it be allowed? Then he cooked it. The Jew didn't cook it. You're on his side. Why would it be allowed? That should be considered a cooking action by a guy. So, yeah. Sorry.
The question is his utensils, are they kosher?
It sounds like the utensils are kosher. But, so do you understand the case scenario? Gemora is talking about a case scenario. Jew made the fire, put the meat on. Okay, we'll get, but this is the
Jew makes the fire or starts the fire.
And here the guy comes along and he turns it. The Gemora wants to know what's the story. If the guy's actions he wouldn't cook without that, then it shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be allowed because he's the one who cooked it. And if it would cook without his action, then what's the chiddush? Why is it an issue at all? So the Gemara says, let's explain this. The idea is it would have cooked from the Jew and his coals and his fire. For sure, it would have cooked, and that's why it's okay. The only difference is the if the guy hadn't come along and hadn't turned the piece of meat, it would have cooked in 2 hours. And now that he came along and he turned it, it cooked in 1 hour. In other words, he didn't cook it, he sped it up.
But wait a minute, that is about participating in the cooking.
Participating in it, but it would have cooked anyway. But he didn't start the process and it would have cooked anyway. So the chiddush is ma
So
hu
the
detema.
Jew started the process.
Sorry?
Yeah.
The Jew started.
The Jew started,
It's
and
only the
the
we
guy
know.
made it quicker. Sorry.
So we know.
Yeah.
They're discussing.
That's exactly what we hold now. Ma hu detema. I might have thought. Korova b'shulam ilsehi. Hastening the cooking process is considered significant, and therefore that's enough to be bishul akum. In other words, my assumption might have been, before you told me that it's okay, that if a non-Jew comes and hastens the cooking process, in other words, it would have cooked without him, but because he came and he mixed and he added whatever he did, so that is a significant part of the cooking process. Kamash Malan, we learned the opposite. We learned it's not so. In other words, the Gemora is saying that what we've learned is if the Jew clearly laid a full possibility for it to cook, all the non-Jew's accomplishment was he sped up the cooking process, not a problem. Then it is considered Bishul Israel. It's not Bishul Akum. It's not cooked by a god. And I think Michael's correct that that's basically what happens in Shulchan Aruch. How do we know? Because if you turn the oven on and you turn the plate on and the non-Jew cooks, that's happening in most homes every day. Of course, it's going to cook faster and efficiently because of their efforts. But the fact that you made the fire is already considered that it's not Bishul Akum. It's not food cooked by a Gentile.
You have to, that's the one.
Yeah.
We're saying that the food
I
was
was right.
on the fire.
Sorry?
We're saying the food was put on the fire by the Jew.
The food was put on the fire by the Jew.
Lit by the Jew.
I think according to halacha, even if the fire was turned on before the food was put
No,
in.
look, there's another halacha that
Yeah.
says you can do it, but I'm
Yeah,
saying in this
yeah,
case, the
yeah,
Gemara is
yeah.
indicating that
The Gemara is indicating that the food was already
food is
there on the
already
fire.
on,
Yeah, the food was
which
already
is
there.
the Swahili
He
type
can-
of
yeah.
chumrah.
Which is the Sfardi Chumrah. Yossi, by the way, those when our friend Yossi from DJs mentioned that a few weeks ago when he was here, that by the Sfardim turning on the knob is not enough. You actually have to put the food on the fire. The Jew has to take the pot and stick it on the fire. Yeah. So next thing the Gemara says, "Well, Omar Rav Asi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan." Rav Asi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Asi said, quoting Rabbi Yochanan, "Kol shehu kemachol ben droisai." Any food that is cooked to the level, and we'll explain what that is, of the food of ben droisai, ein boi mishum b'shul hagoyim, doesn't have a problem of bishul akum. In other words,
It's a certain temperature, right?
yeah, it's a certain, not temperature, a certain level of cooking. There was a robber, by the way. He was a burglar. Sorry?
The first third of the cooking.
I think it's about a third. There was a certain,
That's right.
funny enough, we learned this from a certain burglar, says that they mentioned that he didn't have time to cook his food because he was in a hurry. He didn't want to get caught. So he used to eat food that was barely cooked. He didn't take a long time to cook. And he was called Ben Droisai. And in halacha, funny enough, it's spoken of on many different occasions. Machal Ben Droisai means food that was cooked from raw to the first level of Ben Droisai. Food that hit a level that he would eat. We could call it like singed tuna steak. Well, you know the people that sit in a restaurant and order a steak and they tell the waiter rare, but very, very rare. I think they call it blue when it's more than rare. I think the official word is actually blue when you want your meat even. There's a famous one where the waiter says to the person, like, "Why don't you just go take a bite out of the cow?" He's saying, like, don't cook it, make it all in a, huh? Yeah. So Ben Droisai is a very, very early level of cooking. But I think, if I remember, I think as Ephraim described to us, it means 1/3 cooked, 2/3 raw. Now, the idea is that once food has hit the level of Michael Ben Droisai, it no longer has a problem of bishul akum. You know, like you might go to the butcher, you might say, "I'm a bit nervous that I'm going to be late for my guests. I'm busy braaiing. So I want," what do they call it? Par cooked food. I want my sausages or my boerewors or whatever, my chops at a certain level cooked. They're not raw and they're not cooked. So when I put them on the braai, it's going to be chop. You know, it's not. Now, I can't chops. It's not you. It sounds almost like, Jackie Mason says, not like that, not like that. I don't want it completely raw, but I don't want it completely cooked. I want it like par cooked.
That's how you make from a chicken that chopped.
Yeah. So if the par cooked food is Kamichael ben Deresai, if it's considered like that fellow Deresai would eat it, 1/3 cooked, we're learning here that there's no concept of bishul akum, even though a non-Jew takes it in that raw format and then cooks it. What he's cooking was cooked already, and therefore it's not considered bishul akum. So this is the question of Omar Rav Asi, Omar Rabbi Yechanan. Rav Asi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Kol shehu kamachol ben Deresai, whatever reaches the level of the food of ben Deresai, it's partially cooked, just about edible. Ein baye mishum bishul goyim. This is not subject to bishul akum. What does that mean? Go the other way around. That means, if that statement would mean that any food that a guy takes to cook, which a Jew might have already started cooking, but if it hadn't yet reached that level cooked, then there is a problem of cooked by a guy. So this is a question. Rav Asi's statement is being leveled as a question against what we just said before. Hold on a second. You saying that if a Jew started the process, he turned on the braai, let's say it was a gas braai, put the coals, and then he dropped the piece of meat, but he walked off, the meat was raw. And then a guy came and a guy is busy turning it and making sure it's in the right place. And you saying it's good enough because even without the guy, it still would have cooked. It wouldn't have cooked as fast, but it still would have cooked. Hold on a second. Didn't we already say that it has to be a third cooked? If it's cooked up to a third, then it doesn't matter if a guy came along. If it's not cooked up to a third like Ben Deresai, then it's a problem. The non-Jew cooked it and it's bishul akum. How do you reconcile these two?
The difference in the one case, the Jew actually made the fire. So you're saying it's fine, but in the other case of the Goy, didn't even make the fire, it was a third cooked.
He didn't make the first.
Now you're taking part cooked, but he actually started from the beginning of the process.
Who started from the beginning of the
Goy.
process? Yeah, he started from the beginning of the process. In the earlier one, basically, we said that you made the fire, you put the raw meat on the
I
braai.
understand
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so in the other case is what is the scenario when you've got part cooked already, it's been a third cooked. Now the Goy starts right from the beginning. In other words,
That's exactly the Gemara's answer. That's exactly the Gemara's answer. This is the Gemara. Sorry?
If it's part cooked, it's fine, or skinned, then it's fine.
So the Gemara
The
answers.
process was started by the Jew.
Exactly, the
Give me the
process was
part.
started by the Jew. What the Gemara explains, I think, Brian, that's what you're saying, is that you basically caught the next step. What the Gemara says is it's two different scenarios. In the one scenario, there's a complete interaction between cooking process A and B. They have nothing to do with each other. You know, like when the butcher cooks the par-cooked food and sells it to you, that has nothing to do with the fire that you make at home. It's two completely different processes, which might take place on Monday and Tuesday. So in other words, the two are interrupted. So when we spoke before and we said a Jew puts food on the coals, we said before, and a non-Jew comes along and turns it around and makes sure that it cooks quicker, that's one cooking process uninterrupted. Whether the non-Jew sped it up or not, the fact is the Jew started that flame, he started that braai, there's only one process. Then it doesn't matter where the food was up to when the non-Jew came in. Even if it took an hour to cook and the non-Jew came in 30 seconds later, it doesn't matter. The Jew made the fire, the Jew put the raw, the raw steak down on the grill. The non-Jew might have come 30 seconds later, it was hardly singed. Doesn't matter because it's one cooking process. There we say that as long as the Jew started the fire, and as long as we know that it would have cooked anyway, all the non-Jew did was he improved the cooking process. He made it cook faster. He made it cook better. But it would have cooked anyway. That was the one scenario that we said is okay. When we spoke about food being 1/3 cooked, ben deresai, we meant if there's an interruption in the cooking process. Then we say the following. If a Jew cooked it to this level, then a non-Jew takes over even a day later or a week later from the freezer. It doesn't matter. It's already been 1/3 cooked. It can't be bishalakum. But if the level to which it was par cooked, if the level to which it was par cooked was under that pendrosai measurement, that third, then when a non-Jew comes along and cooks it, it's bishal goyim. It's the same as if he cooked it from raw. If we read it inside,
So you're right.
Possum there. Kagoin the oisva basilta. Rav Asi was referring to a case where a Jew placed the meat that was not yet cooked in a basket. Ushkale goy oisva batanura, and the guy took meat from a basket and put it in the oven. In other words, he took it from the fridge or the basket or whatever, and he put it in the oven. Now we want to know, how cooked was it before he put it in the oven? How cooked was it from the previous and completely separate experience of cooking? Was that more than 33% or not? Was that pendrosai or not? But here we were talking about something else. We were saying there was one cooking process.
Rabbi, in the case like sometime in a Friday when you pass in the butcher,
Yeah,
you see they are frying the meat
they're
outside.
cooking outside. Yeah,
Yeah, you see the non-Jew.
yeah, and they're busy
Yeah,
doing it. Yeah. Many caterers and even Mahadrin Mina Mahadrin, they do that. They what you call it. They will be involved
Is it
in.
enough just to start the fire, or do you have to put the meat on the fire?
For Ashkenazim to start the fire is enough.
Just to start.
The Sephardim want a Jew to put the meat on the fire. Yeah.
Or the Sephardi.
The Sephardim want the
Yes.
meat. Yossi taught us that the 1 week he was here. The Sephardim want that the pot or the meat must be put on by a Jew. Okay, the Jew can walk away and the non-Jew can carry on after that. But the initial action mustn't just be the knob. The action must be the food, the placing of the food on the fire.
And how do you know?
I think inside we can
No
stop over
matter,
there
no
and
matter
chat.
the Jew open the fire, the non-Jew can get the meat in the fridge and they put it.
No matter what, sorry.
When the Jew open the fire, the non-Jew can get the meat from the
Take a
fridge
measurement, you know.
and they put in the fire. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. The non-Jew can get the food from the fridge and put it on the fire.
That way, how will you know if it's served cooked or not?
I guess the chefs can tell us there's a way. By the way, that we don't go by, that, but by the way, the halacha, we don't do that today. Today, we keep a standard that we always get a Jew to turn on the flame. We don't start making a difference. Is this food that was fit for the king's table? Is it not? Is it par cooked? Is it not par cooked? We always want a Jew to turn on the flame because it's easier. And we can run into trouble if we start telling everybody to make cheshbainos, to start making calculations in every caterer's kitchen. We can run into trouble.
That's why you need a
Yeah, exactly.
And an auditor.
Yeah.
But from a Shabbos point of view, with shutdowns and things like that, up here, ISKCON, we rely on 50% cooked, and we say that should be strong. Instead of having a doubt as to whether it's third cooked or not. Half cooked.
You mean that when the power goes off and the food is still
No,
raw?
but just generally speaking, we go 50%.
About 50%,
All the things 50%.
Yeah, about 50%
And
cooked.
then you know for sure that you're not in a doubt situation.
Yeah.
That's for cooking on Shabbos.
It's every Shabbos to Shabbos. Yeah, but I think it would be Machav in Bissau as well. During the week. I mean, a lot of restaurants, what they do is they like hamburger patties, they cook them to a level, and they leave them and then
When the people order, they want
people
to.
order them,
they-
put them on the.
Then they
on the
spruce it
grill,
up, yeah.
Put them on the
Yeah.
grill and finish the cooking.
And finish the cooking process. Yeah.
Is the food.
Any other ideas?
No? But I think that is.
It won't happen in weeks.
That's where we'll stop for
Stage
today.
eight. Yeah.
Sorry about all the technology bumps today, everybody. Sure. When I have my own laptop, I know where I am. Just been a mad day.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So that will obviously. So next week we'll be together, and the following week we'll be Purim away. We'll have to take a
So Purim's on a Tuesday.
Monday night, Tuesday,
Be my birthday.
Yeah, that's right. Your birthday, Michael.
Remember that. When is it marked on Purim?
What day, Michael?
Correct.
I'm pretty.
Are you 17.
So Michael's one better than me.
You actually should put it, not put it itself.
Michael. Michael, my mother waited till after Shushan. She married a Yusham.
Is that wasting time?
Huh? No, she let her husband enjoy Purim first.
Okay,
What's
who
it
had
called?
enough burekas to say bracha achorona?
That's a good question.
I think you did.
Correct.
No, I didn't.
You didn't have three days?
I think I'm gonna have another one of these. Pleasure.
Now,
Wax a little bit.
No, I think, no, it's like, it become like a residence bracha.
I don't know if I'm saying each word correctly. Perfect. Carry the face. You know,
Did you have that? Did you have?
I ate about three.
Yeah, so you can say it then.
I'm just trying to get my phone on.
Just
So I can get to the
pick up the doggish.
Yeah. Rabbi, it was very
You
good
look a bit
tonight.
tired.
So,
Glad it worked out, because I was quite
even without your gold
Yeah, it's Boxing Day.
I'll never be tired of you.
I haven't spoken to Max for a while. Since actually,
Eddie, I'll never be tired of you.
so he is.
I'll never be tired of you.
I must actually check. The last time I spoke to him a few weeks ago, he said he's having nerve issues in the feet or.
Tell me something from the Jake too. To Peter's,
Peter Place.
Yeah.
Jag turn off to Peter Place. Not that far at all.
Peter Place is fully lit.
2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers.
See, well before that.
Yeah, well before that. Yes, yeah.
Baruch
basically-
I said Baruch. You did. Baruch.
Start again.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ala michya v'al הטובה החדשה והארץ הרבה הטובה הברכה שעשית וחלת לבטל לאיך ומפריע משפוט וטובך ברכם אדוני אלוהינו ישראל עמך ישראל מריך ועל ציון משכון כבודך ועל מזבחך ועל כליך ולאי ישראל מרחוש במהרה אמן ועלינו טובה ושמחנו ובניה ואיך ומפריע משפוט וטובך וברך אליך וקדשך בתורה וזכרנו לטובים ויום לטובה יום ראש החודש הזה כי אתה טוב ומתי בכו כדי לך ועל הארץ ולמחיה ברוך אתה אדוני ועל הארץ ולמחיה ברוך אתה אדוני שכבוד ישכונן קומה שבחרת תודות בהם נפש וחי ברוך חיי העולמים.
Amen.
Hang on.
Just before we say Kaddish, there was an accident. A driver fell asleep
Wait,
and a mashgiach was killed.
Where was this?
On a milk truck.
see,
On a milk truck.
he was the Mashgiach.
My name is Russell Manning. Somebody say Kaddish, Betty. חנן המלאכה שאומר רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך לומר להם תורה מצוות שנאמר חפץ למען צדקו יגיד תורה ויאדיר.
De hele honderd van zo'n rabbi, kinderen dat gisteren bij de gemeente, wat gaan we de kinderen dus neder gegeven, vanaf min kan doen, gewoon die is maar wie wil aan mij. De hele stamade baan in Shemai, Shemai, de Chaim Tuvim, alleen ook voor Israël die wil aan mij. Ose Shalom die wil maar wie as Shalom, alleen ook voor Israël die wil aan mij.
Did that accident happen?
I don't know.
It was Friday 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago.
Boys, in case you didn't know, this
Maybe I'll hear it now.
now,
When we go to Shiur, you decided to shop now. That's just bad luck to us.
I told them we were at
Amazing. I came
on street show.
It was
Introduced
open
himself
maybe
for
from
nothing.
2 o'clock until half past.
Told you.
Martin,
Another
good
4
look.
hours.
Zit in de serie?
Take care, everybody.
I'm 8,000
Not sure which
people.
one.
Cheers, Rob.
And I did from 10 to half past 3. So we had a no, it's fine. From half past 6 to 10.
They're not big Boreka eaters there. Sure.
Sholem is like that.
I actually came. This one, I don't know if anybody likes the stuff, because I was coming from Global Shul, where they, if you try that one next week.
Thanks very much.
You guys start off for pretty.
Try it next week.
Once and I'll see you, eh?
Thank you.
Alexander! Oh, jetzt habe ich jetzt. Wo wir wie Zeit liegen. Jetzt wurde
How you doing? Good. How are you? Well, pleasure. Nice to see you. Take care, Sam.